On my wedding, my family didn't show up. Mom texted, "We're with your sister. She needed us more." I just nodded. That night, I ended everything. And what followed was absolute chaos. Sup Reddit. Grab some snacks and get ready for the following shit show. I'm no writer, so excuse me if I stumble over some words. Anyways, I need you to bear with me till the end. It's definitely worth it. David here, 34 male. I'm not sugarcoating this. My family is toxic as heck, and it took me 34 years and a missed wedding to finally grow a spine about it. Meet Grace, my sister. 3 years younger than me, but she's been running the family show since she could talk. She's got this gift for making every situation about her. Birthday parties, holidays, family dinners, doesn't matter. The woman is a walking crisis factory with a subscription service to the bank of mom and dad. Lost her job? Emergency loan needed. Boyfriend dumped her? Therapy bills that somehow become everyone else's responsibility. I once watched my parents cancel a vacation they'd been planning for months because Grace needed help with her security deposit. The same apartment she'd move out of 6 months later due to toxic roommate energy. Meanwhile, I've been the invisible son since birth. Good grades, stayed out of trouble, got a decent job, bought my own house at 28 with zero help. You know what that got me? Nothing, of course. My parents, Rick and Alyssa, have this weird dynamic where they enable Grace's nonsense while expecting me to handle my own life. They throw money at her problems, like feeding quarters into a broken slot machine. In the 5 years since college, they'd loaned Grace roughly $45,000. Car payments, rent assistance, credit card bailouts, medical bills. I know the exact amount because Grace is not subtle about asking for help in family group chats. Me? I asked to borrow $2,000 when my HVAC died in July and got a lecture about building financial responsibility. I financed the dang thing myself at 8% interest while Grace was getting interest-free loans for her latest life crisis. Then I met Celeste. She's a nurse, smart as heck, gorgeous, and she sees right through my family's nonsense. First family dinner, Grace spent the entire night talking about her ex-boyfriend's new girlfriend and how devastating it was to see them on Instagram. My parents hung on every word like she was delivering the State of the Union. Celeste looked at me afterward and said, "Your sister's a narcissist, and your parents are her financial enablers. This is insane." She was right, and it felt good to have someone finally see what I'd been dealing with my whole life. We've been together 3 years now, and Celeste has watched my family treat me like an afterthought more times than I can count. The thing is, I'd gotten so used to being the backup child that I'd convinced myself I didn't care anymore. But deep down, some part of me was still that kid waiting for his parents to notice him. That all changed 6 months ago when I proposed to Celeste. Should have been this amazing moment. But 3 days after I told my parents about the engagement, Grace called them crying because she'd seen her ex at Starbucks with his new girlfriend. Guess which conversation dominated our next family dinner? Hint. It wasn't wedding planning. I had no idea how bad it was about to get, or how satisfying it would be to watch their house of cards collapse when I finally stopped propping it up. Planning a wedding should be exciting. Try doing it with a family that treats every conversation like an opportunity to redirect attention to their favorite child. Celeste and I decided to keep things simple. Small ceremony, close friends and family, nice dinner afterward. The guest list conversation was our first red flag. "So, we're thinking around 75 people," I told them over dinner. Mom immediately perked up. "Oh, wonderful. Grace will be so excited to help plan. She has such good taste, and she's been through this before with her engagement to Adam." Grace's engagement to Adam lasted 6 weeks and ended when she decided she was too young to settle down. The wedding that never happened apparently qualified her as an expert. "Actually, we've got it handled," Celeste said politely. Dad looked confused. "Well, surely you'll want family input." "It's our decision," I said. Grace chimed in with her signature move, making everything about her while pretending to be helpful. "I totally get wanting to do your own thing, but you have to be careful not to make mistakes I made. When I was planning my wedding, I learned so much about what works and what doesn't. The woman planned a wedding that never happened, but somehow she's the expert." "We're good," Celeste said, and I could hear the edge creeping into her voice. The conversation spiraled from there. Mom suggested venues that were way over our budget, because Grace always said she wanted to get married somewhere elegant. Dad questioned our Saturday ceremony because Grace mentioned Sunday weddings are more sophisticated. Grace kept dropping comments about how different her wedding would have been. By dinner's end, they'd managed to make our wedding announcement feel like a planning session for Grace's fantasy do-over. The next few months proved Celeste right when she asked, "They're going to ruin our wedding, aren't they?" Every wedding conversation somehow became about Grace. When we chose our venue, Mom mentioned how Grace always dreamed of an outdoor ceremony. When we picked colors, Dad suggested asking Grace's opinion since she had such an eye for design, and so on. But the real kicker came when we discussed the budget. I mentioned keeping costs reasonable, and Dad jumped in. Well, if you need help, we'd be happy to contribute. Though we're a bit stretched with Grace's situation. Grace's situation was therapy bills, car payments she couldn't make since reducing work hours for mental health, and credit card debt from retail therapy. How much are we talking? Celeste asked. Dad looked uncomfortable. We've been helping Grace with about $1,200 a month for essentials, plus occasional emergencies. But we could probably manage $5,000 for the wedding. $5,000 for our once-in-a-lifetime wedding. They were willing to give us $5,000 while bankrolling Grace's lifestyle to the tune of nearly $30,000 a year. We've got it covered, Celeste said. The look of relief on Dad's face was almost insulting. The breaking point came 6 weeks before the wedding. Grace called my parents sobbing because her ex-boyfriend Adam was engaged to someone else. The same Adam she dumped 4 years ago. The same guy she claimed to be totally over. Mom called that night, not to ask about wedding preparations, but to tell me Grace was really struggling and might need extra attention at the wedding. What kind of extra attention? Well, seeing you get married might be difficult for her, given her situation with Adam. We want to make sure she feels supported. 6 weeks before my wedding, and they were already planning to make it about Grace's feelings. That night, I looked at Celeste and realized I had a choice. Keep playing along with their games, or finally stand up for the woman I was about to marry. For the first time in my life, the choice was easy. You know what's funny about toxic families? They get really uncomfortable when you start setting boundaries, but they get absolutely unhinged when you threaten their financial ecosystem. After Mom's call about Grace needing extra support at my own wedding, I decided it was time for a real conversation. But first, I did something I should have done years ago. I looked at the numbers. Celeste's nursing background made her detail-oriented about money. What we found was staggering. In the past 3 years, my parents had given Grace over $75,000 in loans and support. Meanwhile, they'd contributed exactly zero to my life during the same period. Here's the kicker. I'd been contributing too. Family dinner bills I always picked up. Loans to my parents when they were short after helping Grace. Christmas gifts way more expensive than what I received. Celeste helped me add it up. I'd contributed roughly $12,000 to the family financial ecosystem over 3 years, most of it indirectly subsidizing Grace's lifestyle. I was basically paying for the privilege of being ignored, while Celeste got full financial support for being a disaster. I called Dad the morning after Mom's Grace support call. We need to talk about the wedding. Sure. Your mother mentioned you might want to consider having Grace give a toast, since she's been through the engagement process. Dad, Grace is not giving a toast. I need you and Mom to understand something. This is my and Celeste's day, not Grace's. If she can't handle being a normal guest, then she shouldn't come. Long silence. Then Dad let out this forced laugh. Come on, David. She's your sister. She loves you. She's just going through a rough patch. She's always going through a rough patch. And somehow it always happens during important moments in other people's lives. That's not fair, isn't it? When was the last time we had a family gathering that wasn't about her latest crisis? Silence. Your sister needs support right now. Family supports family. Then support me. This is my wedding. Act like you give a dang about that instead of managing Grace's emotions. We do care about your wedding, but we can care about more than one thing at a time. And there it was. The thing I'd been hearing my whole life without realizing it. Translation: you're not important enough to be the priority, even on your own wedding day. You can care about more than one thing, but I'm only asking you to prioritize one thing for one day. My wedding? If that's too much to ask, then don't come. David, that's... And another thing. I'm done subsidizing this family's financial dysfunction. No more picking up dinner bills. No more loans when you're short. No more Christmas gifts that cost more than my rent. If you want to bankroll Grace's lifestyle, that's your choice. But I'm not contributing anymore. I could practically hear his brain processing that their financial safety net just disappeared. I don't understand why you're being so hostile. No, I'm being clear. If you want a relationship with me and Celeste, it's going to be based on mutual respect. If you want to keep enabling Grace's nonsense, that's your prerogative. But you can't have both. I hung up. My phone started ringing 20 minutes later. Mom. In full crisis mode. David, your father told me about your conversation. I think there's been a misunderstanding. No misunderstanding, Mom. I was pretty clear. You can't seriously expect us to ignore your sister's pain just because it's your wedding day. The way she said it made something snap inside my chest. You know what? You're right. I can't expect that. Because in 34 years, you've never prioritized me. Not once. That's not true. We love you both equally. That's nonsense. When's the last time you called me just to see how I was doing? When's the last time you asked about my life without immediately pivoting to Grace's problems? Silence. When's the last time you were proud of me, Mom? Out loud, I mean. I bought a house at 28. Did you tell anyone? I got promoted to senior manager. Did you mention it? I'm marrying an incredible woman who loves me despite my messed up family. Are you excited about that? Or worried about how it affects Grace? She didn't answer. Here's the deal. You and Dad can come to my wedding as guests who are happy for me and Celeste. You can celebrate with us and keep Grace's drama to yourselves. Or you can stay home and manage her feelings. You're asking us to choose between our children. No, I'm asking you to act like parents instead of Grace's emotional support team for one day. And this money nonsense? That's not nonsense. That's me finally paying attention to where my money goes. You want to keep giving Grace $30,000 a year? That's your business. But I'm not contributing anymore. You're punishing us. I'm protecting myself and my marriage and my future kids from learning that love is conditional. I hung up on her too. The financial threat hit exactly like I'd hoped. Within hours, my phone was buzzing with family members recruited to talk sense into me. Apparently, word traveled fast that the family wallet was out of order. But this time, I was ready for them, and I had a spreadsheet. My parents' response came in the form of a group text. Not a phone call, not a conversation. A freaking group text. To me, Celeste, Grace, and even my best friend Danny, who was going to be my best man. After much consideration, we've decided we can't attend the wedding. Grace is going through a very difficult time right now and needs our support. We hope you understand that family comes first. We'll celebrate with you another time. I read that sitting in my office and started laughing. The bitter kind that comes when someone shows you exactly who they are. Family comes first. That was Rich. Grace came first. She always had. Celeste called 5 minutes later. Are you okay? You know what? I actually am. They just did us a favor. They showed everyone exactly who they are. No more pretending, no more excuses. They chose Grace's manufactured drama over their son's wedding. The fallout was swift. Grace started posting on social media about how family bonds were being tested and how she was grateful for parents who understand loyalty. My extended family began reaching out with their hot takes about how I was being too hard on them. But here's what surprised me. For every family member who thought I was wrong, someone else quietly reached out to say they understood. My cousin Jake called to say he was proud of me for finally standing up. My Aunt Susan admitted she'd always thought my parents babied Grace too much. Most surprising was my grandfather. He called me directly. David, I heard about the wedding situation. Yeah, Grandpa. It's a mess. No, it's not. It's clarity. Your grandmother and I always wondered when you'd stop letting them walk all over you. You noticed? Son, everyone noticed. Grace has been running that household since she was 12. But that's not your problem anymore. Then the unexpected bomb came 3 days later. I got a call from my bank about a joint savings account I'd forgotten about. My parents had added me when I turned 18, supposedly for emergencies. I'd never used it, never thought about it, but they'd been using it regularly. There's been unusual activity, large withdrawals over the past few months, and the account is now overdrawn. Since you're a joint holder, I wanted to make you aware. How overdrawn? $4,700. My stomach dropped. I immediately drove to the bank and removed myself from that account and 2 credit cards I'd been added to as an emergency contact. Total exposure. Nearly $8,000 in debt I had no idea existed. After I left the bank, I called my parents' financial advisor. I'd been listed as a contact for years. Steve, this is David Johnson. I need to remove myself from any financial accounts related to my parents. David, getting married soon, right? Actually, that's why I'm calling. There's been family drama and I need to disentangle myself completely. He was quiet. David, I have to ask, are you aware of your parents' financial situation? My blood went cold. What do you mean? They've been liquidating retirement accounts to cover expenses. Grace's college fund has been empty for 6 months. They took a second mortgage last year. I've been trying to get them to discuss debt consolidation, but they keep saying they have it handled. That was news to me. Interesting. How bad is it? Without going into specifics, I'd say they're looking at bankruptcy within 12 to 18 months if something doesn't change. That night, I told Celeste everything. We sat at our kitchen table while I laid out the numbers. So they're going bankrupt supporting Grace, but they still chose her fake crisis over your wedding? That's about the size of it. But look at this pattern. I showed her the data I'd compiled. Every time Grace has a breakdown, their account activity spikes within days. You've been tracking this for months. I had a feeling. The math never worked. That's why I started documenting everything. And if you hadn't removed yourself from those accounts, I'd be legally liable for debt I never authorized. The next morning, Dad called. He was panicking. David, there's been some mistake with the bank accounts. They're saying you removed yourself from our emergency funds. No mistake, Dad. I removed myself from all shared financial accounts yesterday. I have the paperwork if you'd like a copy. You can't do that. We might need access to those funds. For what? Dad, I've been tracking the spending patterns for months. I know exactly what those accounts were being used for. This is different. We're in a difficult financial situation, and having access to your credit? Stop right there. Were you planning to use my credit to cover debt I didn't authorize? The silence told me everything. Dad, I pulled your credit report yesterday. You're not in a difficult situation. You're 90 days from bankruptcy. You've been using my SSN as a backup plan without my knowledge. That's identity fraud. It's not like that. We just needed flexibility. This has been going on for 3 years. You've liquidated over $100,000 in retirement assets to fund Grace's lifestyle. I've seen it all. How do you know? I pay attention. I ask questions. Long silence. We didn't have a choice. Grace needed help. You always have a choice. You chose to enable her instead of letting her face consequences. You chose to bankrupt yourselves instead of setting boundaries. We're family. Nope. Family doesn't try to secretly saddle each other with debt. And I'm pretty sure family doesn't miss weddings for some fake drama. I hung up and immediately called my lawyer. Time to make sure I was protected. Because apparently, cutting off emotional support wasn't enough. And honestly, after discovering they'd been planning to use my credit to fund Grace's lifestyle, I knew they deserved whatever was coming. You know what's weird about planning a wedding without your parents? How much easier everything becomes when you're not managing someone else's chaos. Celeste's parents drove down from Ohio the week before. Her dad, Bob, pulled me aside the first night. David, I hope you know you're getting the best son-in-law we could ask for. Celeste told us about your family situation. For what it's worth, I think you handled it exactly right. Thanks, Bob. That means a lot. Celeste's mom, Karen, was more direct. She cornered me in the kitchen the next morning. Your parents are idiots. Missing their son's wedding for drama? That's not parenting. It's complicated. No, it's not. It's simple. They chose wrong, but you chose right. Also, I looked up your sister on Facebook. Holy crap, that girl posts more crisis updates than a hurricane tracker. I nearly choked on my coffee. You stalked Grace's social media? Honey, of course I did. Your sister posts about her emotional journey roughly every 8 hours. Last week she had a breakthrough about toxic masculinity because her barista was male. The morning of the wedding, I woke up feeling calm. Danny showed up early with coffee and bagels. How you feeling, man? Good. Really good, actually. Any regrets about the family thing? I thought about it. Actual number. I spent 34 years hoping they'd see me. Really see me. Hoping they'd prioritize me just once. They couldn't even do it for my wedding. That tells me everything I need to know. The ceremony was perfect. Small, intimate, exactly what we'd wanted. Her parents walked her down the aisle. My grandfather, who'd flown in from Arizona despite being 83, stood in for my dad during photos. Danny's speech was hilarious and heartfelt. And you know what? I didn't miss my parents. Didn't miss Grace's drama or Mom's passive-aggressive comments. What I felt was free. For the first time in my adult life, I was having a major moment without worrying about managing someone else's crisis. But here's where it gets interesting. Apparently, my family couldn't handle being irrelevant, even when they'd chosen not to participate. During dinner, my phone started buzzing. Not just a few texts, a full bombardment. Grace had spent the day having an emotional breakdown on social media about family abandonment and toxic siblings. Danny showed me his phone. Dude, she's posting about your wedding in real time. She had posted a long Facebook rant about how some people prioritize material celebrations over family healing. The post had 37 comments, mostly from family asking what was going on. Grace was responding to each with dramatic explanations of how she'd been abandoned by her brother during her darkest hour. She's literally live tweeting your wedding day, Celeste said. This is insane. Around 9 p.m., my cousin Jake came over looking concerned. David, you need to see this. Your mom is posting on Facebook. Mom had shared Grace's post with her own commentary, heartbroken watching my family fall apart, praying for healing and forgiveness. She'd tagged me at my own wedding. The post already had 26 comments from extended family expressing concern. Mom was responding with vague references to difficult family dynamics and choosing sides. Are you kidding me? Celeste said. She's subtweeting your wedding on Facebook? Danny grabbed the phone. Oh, it gets worse. Look at the timestamps. She's been posting about this all day. I scrolled through Mom's timeline. 7 posts during our ceremony and reception. 7. About family loyalty, supporting those who need it most, and the pain of watching your children choose anger over love. Dad had been liking and commenting on every post. Not subtle comments either. Full paragraphs about difficult decisions and standing by family members in crisis. They're having a public pity party, Danny said. Your entire extended family is debating your personal business on Facebook while you're at your own wedding. That's when I realized something beautiful. They'd just given me perfect ammunition. While I was celebrating my marriage with people who loved me, my parents and sister were having a very public meltdown on social media. They were showing everyone exactly who they were. You know what? I said. Let them post. Let everyone see their true colors. I handed the phone back without responding to any of it. Didn't comment, didn't defend myself, didn't engage. Just let them showcase their dysfunction for everyone to see. The reception continued perfectly. Great food, good music, people actually having fun. Celeste looked incredible, and every time I looked at her, I felt overwhelming gratitude that she'd stuck with me through all the family nonsense. Around midnight, after everyone had gone home and Celeste and I were finally alone, still in our wedding clothes, she curled up next to me. Any second thoughts? About marrying you? Never. About your family? I considered it. You know what? Number. Today proved something to me. We don't need them. We've got each other. We've got friends who love us. We've got your family who treats me better than my own ever did. That's enough. I'm proud of you. And honestly, I'm kind of impressed by how completely they self-destructed on social media today. They couldn't even let you have your wedding day without making it about them. She was right. While we were building something beautiful, they were having a public meltdown online. They'd shown everyone exactly how they handled conflict and exactly how mature they were when things didn't go their way. But it was their loss. They missed being part of something beautiful because they were too busy performing their dysfunction for an audience. And for the first time in my life, I was completely okay with that. Because tomorrow, I'd start showing them what real consequences look like. The thing about cutting toxic people out of your life is that they lose their minds when their usual manipulation tactics stop working. Add financial desperation to the mix, that's when they really show you who they are. We got back from our honeymoon in Italy 2 weeks later to find our house looking like someone had been there. Multiple times. Did you give your family our spare key? Celeste asked, looking at the slightly moved furniture and rifled mail. Heck no. Security camera footage showed Grace had been there twice, once with a key she'd apparently copied, and once trying to break in through the back door after we'd changed the locks. She was looking for something, Celeste said, watching Grace photograph our mail. Financial information, account numbers, anything she can use. I called our lawyer immediately. What Grace had done was breaking and entering, and photographing financial documents could be identity theft preparation. We filed a police report and changed all our locks. But that was just the beginning. The real chaos started when my parents' financial situation finally imploded. Apparently, losing access to my credit had been the final domino. Within 3 weeks of the wedding, they'd maxed out credit cards, defaulted on their second mortgage, and received foreclosure notices. Grandpa called me sounding exhausted. David, your parents are in free fall. They've been calling everyone asking for money. Your aunt, your uncle, even me. They need $40,000 to stop foreclosure. What did you tell them? I told them I'm 83 and living on a fixed income. But son, they mentioned you. Said you owed them for your ungrateful behavior and should be helping since you caused this crisis. I laughed. I caused this? How is that my fault? The family pressure campaign that followed was designed to guilt me into bailing them out. Aunt Carol called me at work. David, I know you're angry, but your parents are about to lose their house. Grace is living there too, and she has nowhere else to go. Grace is 31 and has a job. She can find her own place. But she's not financially stable. Because my parents have been enabling her for a decade instead of teaching her responsibility. That's not my problem. Uncle Bob tried texting me photos of foreclosure notices. Is this really what you want? Your childhood home getting taken by the bank? I showed the text to Celeste. They're acting like it's not the result of years of terrible financial decisions. Are you tempted to help at all? With what money? We just bought a house, paid for a wedding, and went on a honeymoon. But even if I could, why would I? They'd blow it on Grace's next crisis and be back in the same situation in 6 months. The harassment escalated when Grace started calling Celeste directly, at work, during her shifts. Your sister-in-law called the nurses station 3 times during my 12-hour shift, Celeste told me. She told my supervisor it was a family emergency. When I called back, she spent 40 minutes crying about how I stole her brother and destroyed their family. What did you tell her? I told her if she called again, I'd file harassment charges. But Grace wasn't done. The next week, she showed up at Celeste's hospital. Actually showed up, asking for her by name, claiming to be family with important information. Celeste called me from work. Your sister is in our ER waiting room demanding to speak with me. Security's handling it. Are you okay? I'm fine. But she's telling people there's a family emergency. Put me on speaker with your supervisor. Celeste conferenced in her charge nurse. This is David Johnson, Celeste's husband. The woman in your ER is my estranged sister, who's been harassing my wife for weeks. She has no legitimate emergency. She's trying to manipulate my wife into giving our family money. Are you saying this is harassment? I'm saying I have documentation of multiple calls to your facility and now this in-person incident. If she's not gone in 10 minutes, I'll be there with a police escort. That won't be necessary. We're having her escorted out and flagging her in our system. I immediately called my lawyer. Grace was getting desperate, and desperate people do unpredictable things. Within 48 hours, Grace had been served with papers prohibiting any contact with Celeste or her workplace. But the real nuclear option came when I found out what they'd done with my wedding information. Danny called me Thursday night, sounding ticked off. Dude, check your Venmo. Something's weird. I logged in and found 6 requests for money from family members I barely talked to, all citing family emergency and temporary assistance. Amounts ranging from $300 to $1,500. Bruh, they're using your wedding guest list, Danny said. Someone gave them information about your friends and coworkers, and they're hitting them up for money, claiming it's for you. I called my cousin Jake. Jake, did my parents contact you asking for money? Yeah, man. Your mom called yesterday saying you were in financial trouble after wedding expenses and too proud to ask for help. She wanted to surprise you by raising money from family and friends. Did you happen to record it? Actually, yeah. Why? Send me that recording and call everyone else who was at the wedding. Tell them to record any calls from my family. Within 2 hours, I had a complete picture of their operation. My parents had contacted 14 different people, using slightly different stories for each. Some heard I was in debt from wedding expenses. Others heard I had medical bills. A few were told I'd made bad investments. But here's the part that showed their desperation. They'd raised almost $6,000 before I shut it down, and 3 people had recorded calls where my parents specifically said I was financially irresponsible. I compiled everything: the recordings, the inconsistent stories, the amounts requested. Then I sent it to the entire extended family group chat with a simple message. In case anyone was wondering why I don't have a relationship with my parents anymore. The response was immediate and devastating. Aunt Carol called to apologize. Uncle Bob texted that he had no idea they were that desperate. Even cousin Lisa, Grace's biggest supporter, sent a message saying she was shocked by the deception. But the best part came when Grandpa called the next day. My old man did something I didn't see coming. David, I've been thinking about your parents' financial situation. I want you to know I've made some decisions about my will. Grandpa, you don't need to. I do. I've been planning to leave your parents the house and most of my savings. But after watching how they've treated you and seeing this latest stunt, I'm changing everything. What do you mean? I'm leaving it all to you and your cousins who've shown some sense. Your parents can't be trusted with money, and Grace sure as heck can't. That inheritance was substantial, enough to completely change my life and enough to have kept my parents out of financial trouble if they'd known it was coming. But now, they'd never see a dime. 3 months later, my parents lost the house. Grace moved in with a friend whose couch she's apparently still occupying. Dad took a night shift at a warehouse. Mom started working retail for the first time in 20 years. And you know what? I felt absolutely nothing. No guilt, no urge to help. They'd made their choices. Now they were living with the consequences of 30 years of bad decisions. Watching them destroy themselves while I prospered was more satisfying than any revenge I could have planned. You want to know the difference between healthy families and toxic ones? Healthy families learn from their mistakes. Toxic families double down and blame everyone else when their world collapses. And that's exactly what my family did. 18 months after the wedding, my grandfather actually passed away. 85 years old, went peacefully in his sleep. The funeral was exactly what he would have wanted. Simple, dignified, surrounded by people who respected him. My parents and Grace showed up looking like they'd been living rough. Dad had lost weight. Mom's hair was going gray, and Grace looked like she'd been crying for weeks. The financial stress had aged them dramatically. They tried to approach me at the viewing, but I made it clear that wasn't happening. This was about Grandpa, not their drama. Celeste stood next to me like a bodyguard, thinking this was a good time for reconciliation talks. The real fireworks came 3 days later at the will reading. I'd known Grandpa had changed his will, but I hadn't known the full extent. Turns out, he'd been planning this for months, working with his lawyer to make sure everything was airtight. The house, worth about $400,000, went to me and my cousin Jake jointly. His savings, investments, and life insurance, totaling roughly $600,000, were split between grandchildren who'd shown financial responsibility and family loyalty. My parents? They got his collection of vintage fishing lures. Estimated value, maybe $300. Grace, I shid you not, she got a single item. His old cookbook, with a note that said, "Maybe it's time to learn some life skills." The lawyer read the entire will aloud, including a section Grandpa had specifically requested be shared. To my son Rick and daughter-in-law Alyssa, you have spent 20 years enabling destructive behavior instead of teaching responsibility. You have shown that you cannot be trusted with money, as evidenced by your bankruptcy and attempts to use other family members' credit without permission. Therefore, I leave you these fishing lures as a reminder that you need to learn how to provide for yourselves. To Grace, you are a grown woman who has never learned to handle adversity without creating drama and demanding rescue. The cookbook contains basic recipes that might help you develop some independence. The silence was deafening. Mom started crying. Dad looked like he'd been punched. Grace stared at the lawyer like he'd spoken in a foreign language. But Grandpa wasn't done. To my grandson David, you have shown integrity, responsibility, and strength in the face of family dysfunction. Your inheritance comes with no conditions except this. Do not give any of it to your parents or sister. I sat there trying to process what had just happened. After the reading, my parents tried to corner me in the parking lot. David, surely you understand this is a mistake, Mom said, mascara running. Dad was old. He didn't understand the full situation. Mom, Grandpa was sharper at 85 than most people are at 50. He specifically reviewed every financial decision you've made since 2018. We could contest the will, Dad said weakly. You could try. Grandpa anticipated that. I pulled out my phone and showed them a video. He recorded a detailed explanation of his decisions, witnessed by his doctor and attorney. He specifically mentions your attempt to use my credit without permission, Grace's pattern of manufactured emergencies, and the $75,000 you've given her in the past 3 years. Dad's face went white. How do you know that number? Because I've been documenting everything since my engagement. Bank records, loan applications, emergency fund withdrawals. Grandpa asked me to provide a financial summary before he finalized the will. Grace finally spoke, her voice shaking with rage. This is your fault. You poisoned him against us. You turned our grandfather against his own family. I looked at her calmly. Grace, numbers don't lie, and they don't manipulate. Grandpa saw exactly where the money went and made his decision based on 30 years of evidence. That's not true. It is true. And the beautiful part is that it's all documented. Grandpa was a businessman for 60 years. He knew how to read patterns. I walked away before she could respond. The conversation was over. I'd provided the facts and let them process the reality of their situation. That inheritance changed everything. We used part to pay off our house completely, invested most of the rest in retirement accounts and college funds for the kids we were planning, set aside some for emergencies and travel. Meanwhile, my parents' situation continued deteriorating. Dad's warehouse job barely covered rent on their one-bedroom apartment. Mom's retail position got cut to part-time. Grace bounced between 3 different couches in 6 months. Last month, they showed up at our house, all 3 of them standing on my doorstep at 8 p.m. on a Tuesday. Celeste was 7 months pregnant, and I wasn't about to let them stress her out. What brings you here? David, just hear us for a second. Get away from my house. There's nothing to talk about. Son, be reasonable. We're in real trouble. How can you be so heartless? If you don't leave in 1 minute, I'm calling the cops. Conversation is over. I turned and walked back into my house, locking the door behind me. Through the window, I watched them stand there for another 5 minutes before finally leaving. Broken. I haven't heard from them since then, and I've never been happier. YouTube just dropped this new hype feature. If you're hooked on this story, smash that hype button. It tells YouTube this video deserves to blow up, and it keeps even crazier stories coming your way.
Did you enjoy my story? What a journey it has been. I truly wonder, what would you have done if you were in my shoes? Would you have chosen silence to keep the peace, or would you have done what I did to reclaim your dignity? Let's meet in the comments below. I'm so curious to hear your thoughts. I'm reading every single one. Which city are you listening from tonight? If my story resonated with you, you can support me and help me bring more stories like this to the world by sending a super thanks. Your sweet support means the world to me and allows me to continue this journey with all of you. On the screen now, you can see 2 new life stories that I highly recommend you watch next. There are so many more on my channel, each with its own lessons and triumphs. Don't forget to subscribe and click the notification bell so you never miss a new chapter. Thank you for being here with me. Until the next story, with love and respect.